and it's time to talk books again. And I'm excited to be showing you and having a chat with the author of this book, The Recipient. The author is a man who is now living in Adelaide, Australian-born, born in Victoria. I'd like to welcome Dean Mays to the program.
Thanks,
Welcome,
Sue.
Dean. This, I've only just started, I have to be honest, but it's gripped me from the very beginning, which is always a good sign.
Great.
And I'm fascinated to talk to our viewers about the storyline, because I think you've really nailed... There are a lot of books around now, a strong but troubled heroine, if you like. The lead role is becoming more of a common theme. They're great books, but this one has a real twist to it, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It does. I've been drawn to the idea of a strong female protagonist in a lot of my storytelling, but this story presented the opportunity to do something, with a real action-oriented story.
Yeah, and off the beaten track,
Very much so. Yeah, yeah.
And your work in ICU, you are officially an ICU nurse.
Correct.
Working here in Adelaide Hospital.
Yep.
So you've got the medical background too. So medically, this should all be working, all sounding very authentic.
Yes, yeah. A lot of this story was constructed from a lot of research that I did in the very beginning, particularly around transplant surgery and the transplant journey for both the recipient and the donor. So by doing that research, I was able to sort of really construct a convincing sort of story.
We should perhaps enlighten our viewers a little bit on the synopsis. So I'll read you a little piece from the back. Casey Schilling is a vivacious young woman on the verge of making her mark in the world. While backpacking, she's struck down with a tropical disease and suffers cardiac failure. The story goes on. We won't continue, but at the 11th hour, in a life-saving operation, she's given a new heart. And that's where the story becomes very, very interesting. This transference of cravings or thoughts and things has been talked about a long while. Do you really believe this happens, or have you witnessed this?
My own personal jury is still out on it.
Yes.
I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of transplant recipients, and there's definitely two camps. There's one camp that sort of poo-poos the idea, and then there's others that are really kind of taken by it. So, there's no consensus on whether cellular memory, as I like to call it, is a real thing. But it's been written about a lot in popular culture, and there's a lot of fringe medicine that talks about cellular memory. Excuse me. But I think it's just a great storytelling device.
It's a fabulous storytelling device. So this young woman, Casey, has the heart transplant, and this happens fairly early in the storyline.
Yeah, so the story opens.
What happens to her? What is the effect?
Well, we pick up the story 3 years later, and by that stage, Casey is basically a shell of her former self. She's agoraphobic. She hates out the outdoors. She also has horrible nightmares, which she goes to any lengths she can to stop herself from sleeping. And the nightmares that she's having is of her or what she thinks is her being attacked, on a dark road in the middle of the night. The nightmares get slowly more violent and slowly more disturbing, to the point where there's a critical moment where Casey actually breaks down. And she's basically forced to confront this thing that's happening to her. And from then on, she makes a discovery that her donor was a murder victim and that the murder remains unsolved. And the nightmares she's having aren't actually nightmares, they're memories.
So, what a story! What a story! Amazing.
So in order to, I guess, regain her sanity, she decides to take on this unsolved case.
To work out who was the murderer.
That's right.
Yes.
And she sort of finds herself quickly drawn into a fairly deadly conspiracy. So
now you mentioned here that I've read that you've brought in something to do with the refugee crisis here in Australia, or the refugee situation.
Yeah.
How does that tie in with Casey? Certainly makes it very topical, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah.
It does. I can't say too much without giving
okay. We don't. No spoiler alerts.
The plot away.
Okay.
But what I will say is that obviously the refugee crisis that exists here in Australia, it's in the news every day, and I got to a point when I was writing this novel where I was looking for a reason for certain things to happen, and I struck upon the idea of, well, what if this group of people were taken advantage of in a way that that could have some fairly dastardly things happen to them. So,
wow. Okay.
But I'll have to let the readers delve into
we have to read more.
Yeah.
Now, tell me, this is the third book you've written.
That's right.
The other two books, The Hambledown Dream.
Yes.
When did you write that? How long ago was that?
Okay, so The Hambledown Dream was written in 2009.
Yeah.
And the story behind that is that I started publishing that as a blog. Because by that stage I'd virtually given up on the idea of ever being a published author.
Really?
Yeah, so I had this burning desire to tell a story, so I got out there and I started up a blog, and all of a sudden I had this following that were tuning in pretty much weekly.
Wanting to know what was going to happen.
To see what this evolving story was, and one of the people that tuned in as such was the woman who's now my publisher, Michelle Halkett, up in Vancouver.
Yes, so she saw something there. She saw.
Yeah, she did.
So have you always been a writer?
On and off. I sort of harboured this desire to be a writer from a very young age, but you get into your 20s, and I was nursing, and I was sort of fairly
earning
focused,
money.
Yeah, focused on
like
my
that.
career, and then there was children, and marriage and children, and and I guess I got to my mid-30s, and that was when I started to sort of revisit the idea. And
that's wonderful.
Yeah.
I think this book, The Recipient, is going to be very successful. In fact, my gut feeling is that this could make a wonderful movie. Wouldn't that be wonderful?
Oh,
you wouldn't have to nurse. Well, you probably enjoy your nursing, but to be a published author and be a successful one would be a dream come true, I expect.
Oh, look, there's no doubt that there's a certain attraction in that idea. It's a very competitive marketplace there today, though. Out there. There's.
But this is original. This is a very different kind of story.
I'd like to think so, yeah, for sure.
I haven't read anything or heard anything like it. So I think for our viewers it would be a wonderful book to have a look at. It's called The Recipient, and you can see the heart. It's very memorable. In fact, I really like the cover. Dean is an Australian man, lives here in Adelaide at the moment, but grew up in Melbourne. And I'll have a look at your other books as well. The second one was...
Gifts of the Paramount.
That's right, yes. So hopefully our viewers will have a look at some of those as well.
I hope so.
Thank you so much for coming into the program. I wish you well. When will it be in the bookstores?
So it comes out May 2nd.
May 2nd.
Yep. And so we're doing a lot of, pre-release media and the like.
Yeah, wonderful.
Hopefully getting the word out there.
Thank you so much for coming in. We'll be back after the break with more of Our Time, and Malcolm and Janice will be talking about macular degeneration.